Okay, I'm going to call this meeting of the Committee of the Whole of Bellingham City Council to order. Our first item this afternoon is a presentation, information only, healthcare benefits strategies now and into the future. This is an informational presentation regarding the trend of escalating premium rates for health insurance and new requirements and restrictions under the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. The city's future benefits strategy must take into account the employer's shared responsibility mandate, which is effective January 1st, 2015, the 40% excise tax, which is effective January 1st, 2018, and our obligations to bargain changes to wages and benefits with labor groups. And it looks like Beverly Lakey with Association of Washington Cities is here to speak with us.
Yes, good afternoon.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. So yes, I'm Beverly Lakey with the AWC Employee Benefit Trust, and I understand that the council did want to hear information on the Affordable Care Act, so I'm here today to touch on that briefly. Some items, like you had mentioned, the employer mandate, which does go into effect, as well as that excise tax, which while it is a bit in the future, we do need to be considering it now and how it affects our current plans and what plans we're looking to in the future. Okay, so just some brief information about the AWC Employee Benefit Trust. If you aren't already aware, we are a member service pool that serves cities and towns in Washington State. We are governed by a board of trustees that does have regionally elected board members. So 4 regions in the state, regionally elected officials, so mayors or council members sit on that board and are elected by their peer mayors in the area. In addition to that, the AWC Board of Directors, President and Vice President sit on that committee or sit on that board, as does the Chair and Vice Chair of the Employee Benefit Advisory Committee. And they are our governing board. They do have fiduciary responsibility for the Employee Benefit Trust. The advisory committee is a 15-member committee that is not elected officials. They are the working folks in City Hall, the city managers, the HR managers, finance analysts, those people. Again, there's 15 of those, and they are all over the state of Washington, and they do make recommendations to the Board of Trustees, who is, again, that final decision maker for our trust. We do have about 282 participating entities in the trust. We do ensure any city or town is eligible for coverage. We also ensure some special purpose districts that provide a service that might be similar to a city. They do have to apply for coverage with our board. They do have to be approved. They do have to meet certain requirements. But they're typically going to be like a library or a 911 dispatch or a wastewater type district that serves similar functions that a city might serve. So we have about 240 out of the 281 cities in Washington State, and then the remainder of the makeup is those special purpose districts. So when we look at our total enrollment membership, we do have about 16,000 employees insured. When you count spouses and dependents, we have about 36,000 lives insured. So it is a pretty large, significant pool, but we really are working for cities and towns in Washington State. Just some brief information on our mission, vision, core values, and goals. This was really an outcome of a strategic planning retreat that we had and that our Board of Trustees and Advisory Committee had in 2011. So this was an outcome of that strategic planning retreat. A big topic of discussion in 2011 was, do we want to be in this, do we want to provide coverage? Are we going to be a viable trust offering coverage, or are people going to go to the individual market? So there was a lot of discussion at that time. And the decision really was that, yes, we do serve a purpose for our cities and towns in Washington State. We do feel we provide a value to our membership. So moving forward, we want to make sure that we maintain our sustainability and our fiscal health. We do want to bend the trend and keep our rates as low as possible. We do want to increase awareness about the wellness and health promotion programs and increase participation in all of that. Okay, so really quickly, just as a very high-level overview, some of the goals of healthcare reform have certainly been to expand coverage through employer-sponsored plans, the private insurance market, and public types of programs, which we've definitely seen happen this year. It's also been to remove those perceived barriers to coverage and address some affordability issues. So this was started in 2010 and the timelines through 2018, so we've seen incremental changes happen thus far, and while incremental changes have been happening and the goal is to make it more affordable, we do see some trend reducing. We're not really sure if it's due to healthcare reform. That remains to be seen. But we certainly have had some regulatory guidance along the way with every single item that's come into play, and we found it a little bit bumpy, but we're handling it as it comes to us and communicating those regulations as we receive clarifications on those. Okay, so in 2014, there were certainly many changes that came. Certainly, the state and federal marketplace or exchanges began, so that was the requirement that everyone must have health care coverage. So if you're not insured with your employer, you do need to sign up for coverage on the exchange. There were some patient protections put into place where pre-existing conditions are no longer allowed. There is no waiting period. There are no dollar limits on those essential benefits. You can't have a waiting period that's longer than 90 days, for example. There's been some cost sharing. You can't have out-of-pocket maximums over a certain dollar amount, as well as wellness program changes. However, due to our longstanding wellness program, we really haven't seen a lot of changes within that respect. And then there's some reinsurance fees that began, which were put into place to pay those fees for those uninsured members. So we are paying that on behalf of our membership. So the bigger thing that probably people have heard about as well here is the employer shared responsibility, or the pay or play. So while those final rules were published in February of this year, the mandate was there, information was there, we just needed some clarification, which came in February of this year. And it does apply to those large employers. Those have been defined as 50 or more employees. There has been some transition relief for those employers that are less than 100 employees as far as when they are required to comply with this pay or play or employer mandate. Also, clarifications were given on what a full-time employee is, who you have to insure, what a part-time employee is, what's the definition of a seasonal employee or a variable hour employee. So I think probably as far as Bellingham's concerned, they've been covering employees that work 20 hours or more a week, so there really is very minimal changes that needed to occur as far as complying with the mandate. So Bellingham was in really good shape. There's some additional information. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but if you have questions on what is a part-time employee, what is the definition of a seasonal employee or variable hour employee or volunteer employee, those were all clarified in February of this year. So here's some additional information. And I do have copies of this presentation, which I didn't hand out quite yet, but if you would like them when I'm done, I'll leave them for you to have. Oh, you have a copy? Okay, great. Okay. So probably the lesson here is to employers to realize that there is this mandate in place. They need to be looking at their policies on file. They need to adopt a policy and monitor the policy. And they need to make a decision if they are going to insure part-time employees, which they aren't required to do, or not. So essentially just adopting that policy and monitoring it. There's also measurement periods in place when you're looking at designing a policy. The AWC has recommended using a 12-month measurement period. That's what the City of Bellingham has also adopted. Therefore, the stability period will be a 12-month period as well. Also know that there are some new reporting requirements that go along with this mandate, and for calendar year 2015 to be reported in 2016. So the IRS has issued some form numbers and timelines similar to W-2s. Guidance is issued, but clarification is still needed as we get closer to those dates. We expect to have more information, and our assumption is that while the employer certainly will have some responsibilities on filing some of these forms, the AWC may be able to file some of these forms on behalf of the members, but really more clarification is still needed. Okay. As far as the pay or pay penalties, there are penalties in place if you aren't providing minimum value coverage or you aren't providing coverage at all. It is applicable to full-time employees, and the penalty applies if a full-time employee goes out on the exchange, purchases coverage, and receives a premium tax credit. So Bellingham's intention is to be in compliance and therefore would eliminate the possibility or potential of that tax penalty. So we know there's a penalty, but Bellingham's in really good shape as far as making sure that the appropriate classification of employees have coverage. Okay, so moving to the longer-term strategy, although 2018 is really just around the corner when you look at bargaining benefits, the 40% excise tax, or a high-value plan tax, as I think the law technically terms it, is often referred to as the Cadillac tax. And that is a tax imposed on premium coverage or premium dollars or a value of coverage that is over a set threshold. So if the cost of your plan is over the set threshold in 2018 that the Affordable Care Act has established, that value will be taxed at 40%. So the goal of the tax from the feds was to discourage overuse, abuse of the healthcare system, and essentially that tax is going to finance those that are uninsured that are receiving that type of a subsidy. So this is a tax that is applicable to all employers, so not individuals, but all employers of any size providing coverage.
Beverly, this ceiling for a premium plan, that refers only to the employer's contribution to it, or to the employer and the employee's contribution?
It is. It's the value of the plan or the cost of the plan. So it's the employer and employee contribution, so the total premium of the plans, in addition to any contributions by the employer to a health savings account or a health reimbursement arrangement, or if the employee has a flexible spending account, an FSA, it would be the employee and employer contributions to that account, because those are in the IRS, in the eyes of the IRS, those are all considered health plans.
That's disappointing, because I thought there'd be a way that we might be able to avoid this premium tax, but it sounds like different cost-sharing arrangements won't make a difference.
Correct. Different cost-sharing arrangements will not make a difference. However, we're going to, as we move into just a little bit more of this presentation, we're going to talk about those plans that are subject to that and what the AWC has made a decision to do as far as offering those plans or not. So the guidance on how this tax works is just still a little vague. We expect more guidance to come closer to 2018, but we do believe it will be a tax that the employer has to report on some kind of quarterly basis and true up based on the amount that they owe if they have individuals going over that threshold. And on this next slide, you'll see what those thresholds are. So the feds came up with these dollar amounts back in 2010. So what they've indicated is that in 2018, for a general employee, the cost of that employee's medical coverage, so employee plus employer contribution, and not the 2% premium discount amount. So you're a Well City, you do receive a 2% premium discount on your Regents, We can't factor in that 2% discount because that isn't the true value of the plan. Any employee or employer health FSA contributions, HRA contributions, or HSA contributions by the employer will count towards this. What doesn't count towards this is dental and vision. So we've unbundled those plans. Those premiums will not count towards this. The ceiling in 2018 for an employee only is $10,200. For any other tier, employee plus spouse or any other family members covered, $27,500. Now, the high-risk professions do have a higher cap. However, the way the law is currently written is that the majority of your workforce has to fall in that high-risk profession, which would be like police and fire. If the majority of your workforce doesn't fall under that high-risk profession, then you do not get to take advantage of those higher thresholds. So AWC is working with the National League of Cities on this issue because many other states, city employees, cities have this concern as well because they do employ police and fire. However, they're not usually the majority of the workforce. So the way the law is written, we have to default to that general, the $10,200 or the $27,500. In addition, multi-employer is out there, but multi-employer refers to ERISA plans that, like a Taft-Hartley type of plan with a composite rate, and we don't fall. The AWC does not currently fall under that category. So we really are looking at that top general tier. In addition, when we look at 2019, that dollar amount is anticipated to increase by CPI plus 1%, and then after that, just CPI. So, in looking in 2018 and negotiating benefits, we really have to be thinking about this now because there are certain plans that are set, if we actuarially look at them in the future, they are set to hit that Cadillac tax, and that 40% tax on the value over that threshold is not going to do the employee any good. It's not going to do the employer any good. It's a tax. It's money going out of the city budget. Okay. So really quickly, just wanted to review the plans that you offer, and then we'll talk about some of the decisions our Board of Trustees made about these particular plans. City offers a benefit package that includes a Regions Health First plan, a Regions High Deductible plan, a Group Health $10 copay plan, and then a dental and EAP plan as well, in addition to ensuring those LEF ones, so under the Regions LEF 1 Plan A. Actuarially, the Health First plan is scheduled to hit the excise tax in 2018 or shortly thereafter. So the board has been educated about this, advisory committee has been educated about this, had a discussion at numerous meetings this year, and at their June meeting made the decision to terminate two plans. One of them that was scheduled to or looks like it will hit the excise tax, that Health First plan, which employees have the option here on, and the Group Health $10 copay plan in 2018. It was pretty loud and clear from our advisory committee and different members within the trust that the excise tax is not going to be a benefit to anyone. As far as negotiating benefits, their preference was that the plans weren't there so that they couldn't negotiate to stay on those plans and then pay that 40% excise tax. So with the elimination of those plans, the only plans AWC is going to offer members are plans that fall below that excise tax, with the exception of our LEF ones. So very quickly, I'm not going to go over in detail here, but this gives you an idea of the plans that we currently offer in addition to that Health First plan and what those premiums are. So you can see what the employee premium is, and we rate based on who's enrolled. So if someone only has a spouse enrolled, it's employee plus spouse. That's the premium, but you'll also see those full family premiums there. And it really is a significant amount that the city is paying for coverage, even if the city is paying or the employee is paying a portion of that coverage. When you look at what that annual premium for a year would be on the Health First plan, it's about $23,000, which equates to over $11 an hour working a 2,080-hour work week. So it is a significant premium. We do offer a $250 deductible plan, a $500 deductible plan. Premiums go down as your out-of-pocket exposure goes up. This is a slide of the group health plan, so your current $10 copay plan at $519. Looking at the other plan options available, lesser premiums, more out-of-pocket exposure. And this is kind of the base plan for city employees. I think for the city pays the majority of this premium for an employee and family, which equates to almost $9 an hour for someone working full-time. The high deductible health plan, the city offers the Regents plan, so significantly less premium. City also contributes to that health savings account, so even with that contribution, it keeps it under that Cadillac tax level for quite a while. And towards the end of the presentation, I've got some slides that demonstrate that were provided to us by Aon Hewitt, our broker consultant. These plans have a higher deductible, more exposure, but you have the option of that health savings account. And really quickly, if you're not familiar with the health savings account, it is a bank account in the employee's name. The employer and the employee can contribute to it up to a certain threshold amount, and that health savings account stays with the employee regardless if they move off of the plan or move somewhere else. So it really is their money. It's used to help pay for that deductible, and it has that kind of triple tax savings with it's not taxable income as long as it's used for qualified expenses. So it works with that high deductible health plan. Okay. These are the actuarial information provided to us by Aon Hewitt, where this shows our active plans, the enrollment on our active plans, and the year that it crosses the threshold for that Cadillac tax. So you'll see that Health First plan is right there. For the family, it's averaged out. Not all family members would hit it, but some might, so averaged out to hit it 2020. While the group health was not anticipated to hit it as early, the board made the decision to also eliminate a high-value plan, which that's considered a high-value plan, and also to preserve the sustainability of the trust. We felt that if we got rid of a $110 copay, we may see a large shift and the claims come over to the other plan, which could make those premiums increase far higher than they have in the past. And this is just some additional information on the assumptions used. It's just important to note that the left one actives and those retired who aren't on Medicare, those who retired are on Medicare, are also subject to it. So it's important to note that those left ones, whether they're retired or not, it's an employer-sponsored plan, so those plans are subject to that Cadillac tax, and most particularly for those left one actives and those that aren't on Medicare we'll see a significant hit, and that is of huge concern to us and to our member employers. So again, we're working with the National League of Cities Legislative Steering Committee to exempt this group of coverage from the tax, but it is a state-mandated benefit that can't be reduced, so it is a benefit the cities have to provide, but we're looking at trying to exempt it from the excise tax. And more information to come on that. Those are non-Medicare. These are Medicare excise tax projections. We have a Medicare Advantage plan available for those retirees that are on Medicare, and that moving coverage to that plan moves that excise tax out a bit. And then we do also have a calculation tool for employers to use, not only for active but for retirees, that they can plug in their own numbers to see where they would fall in that Cadillac tax. So looking ahead at benefit goals, employers definitely want to provide quality benefits, but on the other hand, they want to reduce premium contributions for the city as well. The current premiums that the city is paying for those rich benefit plans just aren't sustainable. So what other options are available? We do have high deductible plans available that the city is offering. So offering lots of options and letting employees choose options is a good route to go. Also providing that savings mechanism through the health savings account is a good option for employees. And then looking at preparing yourself, preparing employees for that Cadillac tax that comes into play in 2018. And I did have 2 sessions earlier where all employees were invited, and we did have a good turnout for those sessions. So definitely getting that education out there to employees. So just some future discussion, future thoughts in light of the fact that the AWC is eliminating a couple of plans in 2018. Just wanted to make you aware of other trust plans available. The trust will also be looking at potentially devising additional plans that would be under that Cadillac tax for future enrollment. We want to make sure we educate employees. They need to be a part of this as well, and just make you aware that we have a calculator available to forecast that trend. Do you have any questions of me while I'm here?
Yes, any questions for Beverly? There's a lot of
Thank you very
information.
much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Beverly. We appreciate it. Okay. Going to move into our next item this afternoon. Extension and renewal of an emergency ordinance creating interim zoning for the establishment of facilities producing, processing, and retailing recreational marijuana. On August 12th of 2013, the council adopted an emergency ordinance and interim zoning regarding land use regulations related to the production, processing, and retailing of recreational marijuana. The emergency interim ordinance was adopted to allow staff time to study the issues concerning recreational marijuana and for the state to adopt final rules. This ordinance expires August 12th of this year. The renewal of these interim regulations will allow staff the time to draft final rules and conduct a Type 6 legislative review beginning in September. The proposed renewal does not include changes to the previously adopted interim rules and will continue to allow individuals to apply for licenses as authorized by I-502. It is anticipated that the state legislature will pass rules related to medical marijuana, which ideally will be harmonized with rules related to recreational marijuana. And do we have Alan? Yes, Alan here today to present
Alan
to
Meritor,
us.
Deputy City Attorney. Staff recommends that council maintain the status quo and adopt the emergency ordinance that's before you today, which would extend the interim zoning for recreational marijuana for an additional 6 months. Businesses in the city are currently producing, processing, and retailing recreational marijuana under these interim rules. Passage of the emergency ordinance requires affirmative vote of at least 5 council members. If you approve the ordinance this evening, it will take effect immediately, and state law requires that within 60 days that council conduct a public hearing on the emergency ordinance. So that's all I have to say. I can answer any questions that council may have.
Great. Thank you, Alan. Yes, Michael.
Move to recommend approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions this time, Michael?
How many more times do we foresee having to extend this emergency ordinance? What are we waiting for to finalize?
So my understanding from talking to Kurt Nabafeld, he couldn't be here. He's away on vacation today. But the planning department is beginning the Type 6 process next month, starting with the Planning Commission. So I think we're hopeful that we can get it all done within the next 6 months. So when you vote on final rules, this interim zoning will just go away.
Okay, anything else? Pinky?
I just want to clarify for people listening, what we're doing is just leaving things as is.
Correct. So the interim rules allow the production and processing of recreational marijuana in our industrial zones, subject to some state rules on 1,000-foot buffers, and allow retailing of recreational marijuana in our commercial and industrial zones. Current rules, those are the current interim rules. They will remain in place by your action if you take action this evening.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay. All those in favor of this ordinance, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes 6-0 with Knutson out of the room, and we'll bring that forward this evening for final passage.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next up, some more information for us. 2014 second quarter financial review. Our financial city guidelines require the finance director to make quarterly financial reports to the council. This report is an overview of our internal financial statements for the period ending June 30th, 2014. And welcome, Brian Henshaw.
Thank you very much. Brian Henshaw, City of Bellingham Finance Department. I'm going to give a quick overview of the second quarter financial review. I'll just say that online is the complete financial statements for the city and also this presentation for people, and that's at cob.org. We'll start out, overall the economy continues to be mixed. Some good news is that we have continued to add jobs since the recession. Over 5 years ago, we are now back up to on trend for about a year of 85,000, which is back to the 2008 level, which was the peak. We lag slightly behind the state rate. Unemployment rate is 5.8, and the U.S. rate was 6.1 and just went up to 6.2 in July. So a little bit of good news there. Also in the permit center, we've had a lot of activity in the first 6 months of the year. Last year, you see, we did $36.7 million of permit activity. So far this year, 97.1. It's a good mix of single-family apartments, new commercial, industrial, mixed use, and then the largest category here, which is commercial alterations or remodels on the industrial side, which is the biggest so far this year. This is important for the city. It's a leading indicator of basically all future tax revenues, hookup fees, payments to the utilities of city revenue. So as this goes forward, this is a good indicator for the city. Although some of this will take time to develop and actually show up in the rest of the numbers that I show you, this is permit activity. It is not necessarily permits that have been pulled and under construction yet. So it's even a leading indicator of construction. Citywide revenues for the first 6 months, $107.2 million. This is 42% of budget. And you'll see that for the most part, we are trending close to budget and also to last year, with two exceptions here in interest, rentals, bonds. This also includes loans, and then down here in grant entitlements. Most of this is tied to capital projects that are just starting up, as June is the beginning of kind of the construction season, so I'll look to see these. We have to do the construction first, and then we draw down on the grants and loans, so that should be improving as time goes on into the next quarter. Citywide expenditures, $99 million in the first 6 months. Operationally, it's 41% of budget, and then capital is only so far 14% of budget. And again, it has to do with timing of the projects. Many are multi-year, and then also just the season of construction, June, July, August, September. So I'll look to see these improve as the summer months continue. I'll quickly go through just the main enterprise funds of the city. The first one is Street Fund, collects fuel taxes, a little bit of miscellaneous income, service charges to other funds because it has the engineers housed within it, and then sales tax. Sales tax is down slightly from last year and also the budget due to two factors. One, sales tax is trending down, and two, council approved a reallocation of this to pay for the Public Development Authority and also community development activities that happened in 2014. So again, you see the same trend here. Grant revenue is where we haven't received that revenue yet, but overall this is a pretty normal trend for the street fund. On the expense side, a similar graphic, we're on budget or below budget in all categories except capital. Capital Street has $25 million of capital projects, $17 million of which will be paid for by grants. So extremely good on the street department on getting grants to pay for a lot of our large capital projects that are underway. Next one I'll talk about is the water fund. $11.1 million in the first 6 months. This is 40% of budget. Couple interesting things here. One is that we're state mandate to move everybody over to meters, water meters, so this will continue to increase as the unmetered accounts are being switched over. January, we moved about 5,000 people from unmetered to metered, and we'll continue to do that over the next 3 years as all utility water and sewer in the city will be metered by 2017. On the expense side, again, a similar trend where we haven't are below budget so far as the capital. We've done $9.3 million of expenditures, and that is about 39% of budget. Capital projects are only 12% so far year to date, but again, this will improve as the year goes on. The main project here is the Blowdale stormwater and also some land acquisition in the watershed. So those are ongoing projects that we'll see that get utilized during the rest of the year. Sewer revenues. Sewer revenues are also exhibiting the change from unmetered to metered. You pay for your water usage on the water meter side, and then the corresponding the sewer. They are at 40%. Sorry about that. Sewer revenues are at 41%. No, revenues are at 50%, so we're right on budget. Sorry about that. Expenses are at 41%. Again, it's on the capital side here that the sewer fund is just going into the heavy constructions. The two big projects is main replacements, which is $3 million, and also to finish up the wastewater treatment plant, which is in its final approving process and final billing states. Now I'll move on to the general fund. This is total revenue for the general fund on a seasonal basis. And you see we started out the year ahead of budget. In March, at the end of first quarter, we are slightly below. The two big spikes here are for property taxes, and so we trended above in May. But at the end of June, we are slightly behind on the seasonally adjusted forecast for general fund. And I'll show you here in detail. The detail is these are the main revenue sources for the general fund: property tax, sales tax, business tax, utility tax. This is where we normally receive the majority of the general fund revenue, and it's seasonally adjusted on historical receipts. There's some seasonality for Christmas shopping and also utilization of the utilities. You'll see here how much we've received in each of these categories year to date. And these are the differences, either favorable or unfavorable. So far, the biggest concerns I have is on business tax and also utility tax. Utility tax has some variations in it based on utility rates, both for city water sewer, but also telephone and cable. But on the business tax side and sales tax, I've just continued to see a negative trend from the beginning of the year through June and actually into July. So that's a concern. The good news is we are well diversified, so where we have some negatives, we also have some positives. So overall, less than 1.45% overall volatility from the revenues on forecast, but it is a negative trend after 6 months. Sales tax is one of those. The positives are in food and eating and drinking establishments, auto parts and sales, and then also here on specialty trade. But you'll see on all these other categories we're at or below last year's sales tax revenue. And in particular, general merchandise, which is our largest category, is negative year to date over last year. General fund expenditures, we're on budget for all categories. You'll see that capital and principal and interest are almost too small to even be graphed. The largest by far is salaries and benefits. 70% of the general fund expenditures to date out of the $34 million. We have spent $23.7 million on salaries and benefits so far this year. By department, you'll see that police, fire, parks are the three largest departments for expenditures in the general fund. Non-department is the general fund portions for all of the contributions to Medic One, the federal building remodel project, elections, cemeteries, citywide expenditures that aren't housed in any one department. The next largest department after that would be library, and then this is planning and community. So all departments are at or below budget so far, which is good for the first 6 months. The last slide today is just the investment portfolio. As of June 30th, I had $163.9 million of city funds invested. This is all of the reserves and funds that are available. We pool them and then distribute the interest earnings and bond interest back to the funds that the monies came from. We have two benchmarks. One is the state pool, the LGIP, which is this line here, and then this is a revolving 3-year treasury, average of a 2-year treasury over 3 years. And you'll see that we continue to exceed the benchmarks that we have, but the downward trend continues. We were plateaued here for about the last year and a half, but interest rates continue to be lower. It's harder to get a return, and this is also a contribution of that. This is just the makeup of all the investments that are in the portfolio at the end of June. So that was a quick summary. It is online with the complete financial statements. If you have any questions, I'd take those now.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Any questions?
That's the website if anyone would like to see it.
Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, Brian. Appreciate it. Next up, update on the fireworks ban enforcement. Police Department staff will provide a briefing on enforcement efforts of the citywide fireworks ban, which was in effect during the most recent 4th of July holiday. And it looks like we have both Chief Newbold from Fire and Chief Cook from Police here today. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome. Thank you again. Cliff Cook, Chief of Police. I'll give you a quick summary of the enforcement for this year. The department ran an emphasis enforcement program from Saturday, June the 28th, which was the first day of legal sales by the state, permissible by the state, through Saturday, July the 5th. During that time period, we received approximately 221 calls for fireworks complaints. In 2013, we received 163 calls during that same time period, so an increase of about 58 calls. On the 4th of July, we were fortunate regarding costs to deploy our personnel. This was a flexible resource day, which on the current schedule the police department works under, there are 2 days a month where we have all our personnel in. The normal practices, half are deployed to the field, the other half go through training. On the 4th, we did not send them to training, we put them out in the field. So we had approximately double our normal complement of officers working patrol calls. However, this was not in addition to the emphasis. Our emphasis was strictly to assign officers to do nothing but answer fireworks calls. Our average response time to fireworks calls by our emphasis teams, and they began as just a singular officer at the beginning on the 28th and upwards of 2 to 3 during the time period, was 17 minutes. However, our average response time when a patrol officer, keeping in mind we had double the deployment, was 13 minutes during that same time period, particularly on the 4th. We recognize that next year we'll need to deploy our officers to a later hour of the day, but overall I was quite surprised to hear from our personnel that the general belief was that this year it was much quieter, much more so than people had anticipated. And I have to attribute that to the fact that the residents of this community want to abide by the law and do so. The few individuals that didn't, our officers found some pled ignorance of the ban, and others just basically decided they were going to participate in that activity in spite of the ban. So we only issued one citation. We did confiscate fireworks, particularly on the 4th and on the 5th. But the issue is problematic because the vast majority of the calls we receive are not specific to a location. They tend to be in this 100 block of this particular street or in my neighborhood. Call would be dispatched to an officer. The officer would go out, listen, see if they could locate them. In many cases, by the time they got there, the activity was over. So, yeah.
Bill Newbold, Fire Chief. Just to echo what Chief Cliff indicated with regard to police activity. From the fire side, the reports that I received back both from Life Safety Division and our Operations Division is it was a relatively uneventful year. Compared with our even average calls per day, which are typically over 40 calls per day in the fire department, we were under that 40 calls a day on July 4th. It appears that we had one small grass fire, no building fires. In previous years, last year, for example, we did have one building fire and multiple grass fires. So as far as response efforts, it was relatively uneventful. We partnered with police in some of the community patrols from the 28th to the 5th, 28th of June to July 5th, 4 hours each of those evenings. We did incur a nominal overtime cost for that. Additionally, on July 4th, we put in service a 12-hour additional battalion unit, and that helped us throughout our area as well as Fire District 8, which we provide coverage to, with our battalion chief. So again, I think the messaging to the community and the sense of the community to uphold that really played out this year.
Okay, great. Any questions for either of our chiefs? Gene?
Just the enforcement issue, Chief Cook. You really have to see somebody blowing this stuff off. You just can't run out to every call that there and say they hear a noise. You have to actually, and I think that's one of the problems that the public has, is they think if they hear a noise and you send them to their house, but you actually have to have evidence.
That's correct. Yeah, we have some people that believe that the mere residue being observable is enough to cite. That's not true.
Okay.
But I agree. In my neighborhood, I'll speak for my own neighborhood, we didn't hear anything till 8 o'clock at night, and it didn't last very long at all, so it was better.
Jack?
Thank you. Yeah, I found it quite interesting because I wasn't expecting it to be as quiet as it was. And I think overall the ban did work very well. There certainly were lots of exceptions, but what I found was, or what I saw, at least in my own neighborhood, it seemed like people were kind of gaming the ordinance more than anything else, where they set it up so that they were going to go and blow off all their stuff all at one time, and by the time somebody would make a call and you guys would respond, they were already inside watching TV or something. But you know, there was some major explosions going on in Birchwood, particularly on Birchwood Avenue. But you know, overall, it seemed like it worked very well. And I don't know how you. I mean, obviously, it sounds like it's got to be that an officer has got to go and see it. You can't go and take a citizen eyewitness complaint.
We can, in certain circumstances, if they're willing to testify.
Okay.
That becomes kind of a point of contention, because that means somebody may have to take the day off of work to appear in court, but it's not. Doesn't happen very often.
Okay, thank you.
Michael?
I think I agree with you, Jack. My impression is that many neighborhoods were far quieter, but there were a few places that were the same as before. I guess that's to be expected. My question has to do with right afterwards, I think we all received a couple of emails of citizens who went online and tried to check the report record, and it seemed to them that there were far fewer complaints logged. They couldn't find their complaint in the log. Was that due to a delay in the reporting of the calls, or might some calls not show up in the records?
If you're referring to the police department's long-arm reporting system, which is an actual, where a call would be documented by an officer making a written report, that would be an accurate statement. If you were looking at the CAD, which is not something the public can look at, that's where the majority of those calls would be. Many times, the calls we receive are what I refer to as watch fors. Basically, I'm hearing fireworks in my neighborhood. I can't tell you where they're occurring exactly. I just know that I'm hearing them. So we'll dispatch a unit. The officer will get out there. Either there will be no fireworks or they're trying to pinpoint them, and then they'll stop. That will not generate a long-arm report. That just merely goes into the CAD, the computer-aided dispatch system. The officer might make a notation in response to that call, check the area, unable to locate. So the vast majority of calls such as that wouldn't even go into our long-arm system.
So when you report 221 calls, is that the
I'm
long?
sorry?
When you report at the beginning there were 221 calls or complaints, is that the?
Or dispatch 911 calls.
Okay, not the long arm. The long arm number would be smaller.
A long-arm report would have been made in the case of confiscated fireworks. And if it's an infraction, it might not necessarily generate a long-arm report because the officer may document the activity on the back of the citation, and the court would write their affidavit from that.
Okay, yeah, Jack.
Did you find specific neighborhoods that were more problematic as far as the calls that were coming in, and would that change your emphasis patrol for next year?
The officers didn't report that being the case. It was kind of all over the city, somebody violating for a period of time, and then it would stop. I think what we ran into is what you experienced. Somebody decided to get rid of everything all at one time, and by the time we got the call and got into the area, we couldn't pinpoint where it occurred. Some cases, again, back to the debris issue, some of that debris may be in a specific yard if it's small pyrotechnics, but if it's the bigger stuff, it's going to be spread out around the neighborhood.
Okay, anyone else? Roxanne.
Well, I just wanted to say, generally speaking, as I've watched this go forward in other cities, it can take up to 4 to 5 years to get some real understanding and results. So I'm really glad that we're starting to already see the results from just this initial push. And then I just hope more patrolling will be the answer to create, and as we do better awareness about this ban, because over time, we want to see the dramatic drop in the emergency room visits and the fire issues and general public safety. So thank you for all of the work that the departments did on that.
Yeah, I just want to echo thank you to police and fire, both departments, for all the extra work you put in and trying to figure out the best way to respond to this new policy direction from council, maybe with a little bit of short notice, and we really appreciate all of that. And to everyone in the city who did abide by our hope to reduce fireworks use, in fact, have it not happen at all, thank you as well.
Kathy, just when Roxanne mentioned the emergency room, I live next door to an emergency room nurse. She works three 12-hour shifts. She went at 8 in the morning on the 4th till 8 at night. 2. So usually the room is full. So that was a good sign too.
Yes. Thanks, Jean. Okay, thank you, everybody. Okay, 2 more items in Committee of the Whole this afternoon. Next up is a letter to Puget Sound Energy regarding divestment in coal power, and I wanted to ask Councilmember Vargas, did you want to sit in for this or not be here? I don't know.
I can sit here, but I cannot vote.
Okay, great. So Pinky is employed by Puget Sound Energy, the subject of the letter, so that's why that is up. Okay, so the Bellingham City Council is asked to consider a draft letter urging Puget Sound Energy to start disinvesting in coal power and simultaneously to increase investment in cleaner, more sustainable energy production to meet present and future energy demand. Further, the letter asks PSE to re-examine its financial commitment to the power plant in Colstrip, Montana for 1/3 of its power production. And this item is going to be presented by Councilmember Lilliquist. Go ahead.
I just want to say that I have been in communication with a local representative from PSE. His feedback is that PSE appreciates the supportive tone of the letter, and they're in general agreement with the long-term goal of clean energy in the future. And they were really more interested in continuing the partnership with the city going forward on energy-saving programs that we're already doing, and maybe even more. So that's good to hear. And the last thing I want to say is I would appreciate the council's support for this letter. I think it's very timely due to efforts ongoing at the state level, including the governor's own carbon emissions reduction task force, which does include Ms. Kimberly Harris, the executive of PSE, in those discussions.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Okay, Jack?
I would want to move this letter forward and to authorize the president of the council to sign it.
Second.
I'm sorry, was the last part and to authorize the president of the council to sign it?
Yes.
Okay, so I couldn't hear that very well. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this letter? I'll just echo what Michael said. I also talked with Dom from Puget Sound Energy, had a really nice, friendly discussion. They're appreciative of our commitment to sustainable, renewable energy and wanted to reiterate their desire to work with us for productive solutions in the future. And I'll be voting for this letter as well. Gene?
I had the same conversation because at first I was a little reluctant, being under the new umbrella that we have now. We are very cooperative with businesses here in Bellingham, and I thought, but after talking to him, he made it perfectly clear that he doesn't think this is adversarial at all, so nobody's going.
Okay, anything further? Jack?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Michael for authoring the letter. I thought the tone and how you constructed it was very well done. One of the better letters I've seen. So thank you.
Great. Okay, all those in favor of this letter being sent to Puget Sound Energy and authorizing me to sign it on the council's behalf, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions?
1.
Okay, we have 6-0 with Vargas abstaining, and we'll bring that forward this evening for final passage. Okay, last item this afternoon in Committee of the Whole. Consideration of a resolution opposing the violence in Gaza and the targeting of civilians. This resolution expresses concern over Israel's violence against innocent civilians in Gaza, reaffirming that the peoples of Palestine, Israel, and the world deserve to live in peace. The resolution encourages all parties to search for a nonviolent path to peace, presented this afternoon by Councilmember Borneman.
Yeah. I think in the summary statement, this probably should have also stated expressing concern over Israel's violence against innocent civilians and the Hamas's targeting of Israel with rockets. This was a resolution that was brought forward by members of the Veterans for Peace and from the Whatcom Peace and Justice Center at our last meeting. And at that meeting, we talked about council wanting to bring this forward to discuss this resolution. I made some changes to the resolution based on input from council members, and changed the numbers that were listed and added as we changed the whereas about the numbers of whereas there had been reports that, and these are as of last Wednesday, the numbers have increased since then, but we were getting this in the packet last week, whereas there have been reports that at least 1,322 Palestinians have been killed, and almost all of them civilians, more than 240 children, and more than 7,100 wounded, including over 2,000 children. And whereas more than 61 Israelis have been killed, including 56 soldiers, including 56 Israeli soldiers and 5 Israeli civilians. And those numbers on both ends have changed since then. Basically, this resolution is a resolution calling on both sides to Well, it basically expresses that that urges both Hamas and the government of Israel to refrain from military operations that are likely to result in the casualties of innocent civilians. I recognize there have been some criticism about why we're using this one and we didn't do resolutions about some of the other conflicts that are equally as horrendous. And I think part of it is because this is the one that was brought forward to us. And quite personally, as a war veteran, as a Vietnam veteran who has seen many of the horrors that exist in war, killings of civilians, other kinds of things, whether it goes on between Israel and Hamas or in African nations or whatever, when we're targeting and the loss of lives of civilians, there is no justification in my mind. It's horrible. It's one thing for leaders of governments or whatever to go shooting at each other. And if you sign up as a soldier, you know, you expect that kind of thing. But when we're seeing children killed in schools, bombs, and those kind of things, wherever it is, whether it's young girls abducted in African nations and used as hostages of war, there is no justification in my mind for those kinds of things. We can call it defense, we can call it whatever, there's no justification. So I bring this up because it has been brought before us. Will this change the world? Will this change what goes on? Probably not, but I think it's important at times for us as citizens of the world to speak up, to be heard, to address the horrors that exist in the name of war, of defense, of whatever. And that's why this is here. And for those in the audience and watching tonight, you know, there will be opportunities because I had gotten comments from somebody today that this was done in back rooms and we've denied people the right to speak, which is, and I clarified that to individuals that there are a public comment period. No one has ever been denied a right to speak, and nothing has been done behind any back rooms. It's all been done and talked about here and being talked about here. Nothing secret, nothing. So that's, and so I'll move recommending approval, but open up for whatever questions.
Okay. We have a motion? Any further statements? I can make a statement if people would like. Or Pinky, go ahead.
I'm feeling really uncomfortable about this. I recognize that war with civilian loss is tragic, and I feel like everyone deserves peace. Everyone deserves to live a full life. But this is a really complicated issue, and I feel like it's kind of, I'm not comfortable putting this forth. I feel as though I don't want to choose sides. I don't want to, I feel like it's out of my realm, really. I think it's good conversations for us to have publicly about what's going on around the world, but what I was sworn to do was to work on things that are involved in the city of Bellingham, and I'm just not, I'm not comfortable with this resolution, but I totally understand the premise.
Gene.
You know, this has been one of the roughest packet weekends I've had in a long time, and I say that sincerely because usually at this point in my career, after serving all the years up here, I don't struggle with too many things. It's usually pretty straightforward with me, and I don't vacillate or I don't go back and forth. But, you know, I have to tell you, this time, this resolution has touched a nerve with the citizenry and a lot of other people. I have never heard from so many people on all sides of this issue, and the advice they're giving me is just leave it alone, let it go. Don't comment one way or another. Now, I fully understand why Terry brings this forward. I fully understand why the group brought it forward. We've been down this road before. We've passed a few resolutions in the past supporting these different groups that have come forward. But today is a good example of how that can be getting to the point of going a little bit too far out of our purview. The rabbi gave us a letter with 8 different resolutions that could come forward to the Bellingham City Council on different issues. And I think if we get to the point of constantly entertaining all these resolutions, it's going to become, it's not going to look like city government anymore. I am absolutely appalled at what's going on over there. We have a president and the Secretary of State who have worked very hard to get a ceasefire. They can't get it done. The United Nations can't get it done. And, you know, I received a few personal emails that told me, and I've never been threatened before too many times, but there was a couple threatening emails that really made me upset, and I'm not even going to repeat them because it's not important to anybody else but me, because when I am being told that I have to vote a certain way, I don't care who brings that kind of stuff forward, it doesn't set very well. And all I know is I've heard from people who have been on the same side of these resolutions who are saying, for God's sakes, don't touch it, leave it alone. And personally, I'm pretty well covered on this. The church that I belong to condemns the violence. The Pope that I look up to condemns this violence. And in a single word, we need to, in a single sentence, could just say condemn the violence. But this one's been a tough one for me. But I'm not gonna support the resolution at this time.
Roxanne?
You know, I just feel like this resolution isn't where the power is. The power is in our citizenry. Each of you have the absolute ability to reach out about this to our federal elected officials. They have the jurisdiction, they have the authority, they're the ones who can do something about this. And that's where our advocacy can come in individually, not through this body, because I'm really glad I lift weights, because we are doing so much heavy lifting for exact Bellingham issues. And that's what we really need to focus on, is so many of the issues that we have coming before us, not confusing them with issues such as this, because this can get out of hand. But honestly, I just don't think this resolution would mean anything to any governing body. It's more important for our citizens to do that outreach, and that's how we should go about it.
I'm going to say that I won't be voting in support, and a lot of the reasons why have already been said, so I'm not going to reiterate them. But what I am going to say is that I want to commend Terry for bringing this forward. And I am so proud to live in a city and a community that is full of compassion and passion for issues here and around the world. Whatever side you are on of these conflicts in the world, or however you feel about whether or not we should pass this specific resolution, this is why I love Bellingham. And I just want to say thanks, Terry. I think that nothing is lost by having a conversation about this in public, and even at the city council level, if we decide it's not something we're going to take action on, this is one place where citizens can speak their minds, and they have, and that's a win. Anything else? Michael?
I actually kind of hesitate to even discuss this because it is such a sensitive topic, and this is a decades-old conflict, and like Eugene, I hesitate to wade into the middle of it. I think I differ a little bit with some people here, in that I do think there is power and importance to resolutions. And so for me, the boundary is a little more flexible, perhaps. I can imagine entertaining some kind of resolution at some point, but I don't think this is the point and this is the resolution. This one feels a bit too much like it's pointing a finger. A single poorly chosen word on this topic can inflame and hurt feelings more so than almost any other subject you can think of. And my intent would be to increase peace and compassion, and a poorly chosen word, and even well-intentioned, can have the opposite effect. And I don't want to make things worse. I don't want to, I want more peace, not less. And if a resolution in my mind feels like it's causing hurt, then I don't want to pass a resolution, even if the intention, and I'm absolutely positive the intention here was peaceful, but I don't think it's going to work out that way if we pass it. So I'm with you, Jean. Leave it alone seems to me the more compassionate and peaceful course of action.
Any further discussion? Terry?
Yeah, I'm just going to say, this is not an attempt to take sides on anything. It is just the condemnation of the deaths of innocent civilians wherever they lie. It's not taking sides on one or the other. And I'm not going to try to strong arm. I'm not going to try to convince anyone here. That's not up to me to do that. But I will always err on the side of maybe saying the wrong word if anything I can do will help save the life of one child, of one civilian from this kind of thing. This has been my life since I've been out of Vietnam. The idea of peace and justice has been at the forefront from me in everything I have done in politics and everything within my soul, and it will stay there. So I have no problems one way or another, but I think these kinds of things need to be said. And when we see the horrors that go on in the world, that we have to speak up. And for me, I have to speak up. And so that's where I'm at with it. I have, like I say, I'm not going to try to strong arm anyone to support something with me, but you know where I stand with it.
Thank you, Terry. Okay, anything else, Jack?
So I agree with some of the sentiments that Michael had expressed, especially about the fact that resolutions from this body, even in a global or a national setting, are important. We don't start movements, especially peace movements like this, if it doesn't come from small bodies, one person speaking up or one small city or medium-sized city speaking up. I think it does have value, and we have shown that a number of times in the past. And I think that it's a very important tool that we use. It's as important as an individual going to the polls and voting. You can't say that we've got 80,000 citizens in this city, but your one vote doesn't count. Well, it does count, and I think that it's the same thing with resolutions. They might look like they're minor, but they really do mean a lot. That said, I would have seconded this motion, Terry, but I do have some concerns about some of the wording, and so I'm not there yet.
Right.
So
and I would have expected that. Because I took a lot of the wording that was there, and I took some of the suggestions, and figured if people wanted to do it, there'd be wordsmithing. But I see there's not the numbers, and
there's not the support right now. And
now. But who knows what will end up by tonight.
Right.
Okay, so seeing nothing further, motion dies for lack of a second.
Correct.
Thank you for bringing it forward.
You bet.
Okay, next is approval of minutes for July 21st, 2014.
Move approval. These are the committee minutes.
Committee minutes.
Move approval.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, or any opposed? Okay, minutes pass 7-0. Old or new business? I have a couple items. Go ahead, Pinky.
I just wanted to remind everyone that tomorrow is National Night Out, and there are a lot of neighborhood associations that will be having events. So please look up your neighborhood and find out if they're having something, and I would love to see your participation.
Michael?
Thanks for bringing that up, Pinky. Actually, I'm hoping to hit at least 2 of them. There's one starting at the Maritime Heritage Park early, I think around 4:30, which will go on for a couple hours. And then I'm going to try to make it over to Samish Way. That'll be starting, I think, around 6:30 at Diego's there on Samish Way. A little walk around and then other stuff at 7. So I'm going to try to hit those 2. If there are other neighborhoods, I know York's having one. Alabama Hill always has a good one. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that is a good one. Okay, any other old or new business? I have a couple items I wanted to bring to folks' attention. We launched a new page on the city website for City Council last week, I think, or the week before. It's cob.org/council, and then you can click City Council letters and articles. So the mayor had a cool page where she has letters and articles she's signed that we thought was really nice for people to be able to see, like have one place they go to and see, and realized, oh, we should have that for our council as well. So Marie worked on getting that established, and so now we're going to build, at least back through this year, a link to all the articles and official articles and letters that the council has been involved with, and we'll keep that up to date moving forward. Can you pass this out? This was brought to my attention recently that some city councils do something like an annual report, and I wanted to see if folks were interested in us utilizing our staff towards the end of this year to put together something small, probably smaller than this even, which is 2 pages front and back for the city of Seattle, but a 1-pager of some of the highlights of maybe what we worked on or accomplished for the year that we could disseminate for our citizens. And I brought it up with the mayor, and she thought that sounded like a good idea, and we could have our staff work on that if folks are amenable. Yes, Mayor Kelly?
And it seems really a great timing, because I do think it's a great thing to get as much information out to our citizens about what's being accomplished in the city. And the port, I don't know if any of you saw the port insert that was in the newspaper, very inexpensive way, of course, with everybody not taking the newspaper anymore, makes it a little more difficult to distribute it that way. But because I had talked right before this about doing some kind of a, like a quarterly, some kind of a brief report update to the citizens too, but I think it's great if the council does this. I intend on continuing to do it so people don't wonder, what did you do all day? Actually did something just like you do. So anyway, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I imagine a number of items on anything we produced would be the same that you had talked about. But yeah, the more we can get info out there, the better.
Well, and mostly we're doing things together, because so many of the recommendations, they come forward to the council approves them. So,
right.
Or you give me direction and we go and we propose something that you've asked for. So it is a working partnership, and I think there's plenty of information to go around to the public so that they know we're all keeping them in mind.
Definitely. Any thoughts, Michael?
I'm definitely all in favor of anything which increases public education of our efforts, not just so they see what we're doing on their behalf, but so they can provide us feedback and reaction to it and guidance. My question, though, is this seemed like an obvious task to maybe assign to Mark, our policy analyst, but I don't know if the rest of people agree that is... I'm hoping it's not much of an additional workload. He already keeps track of much of what we're doing already, not everything, but... Is that the presumed?
My idea was to get the head nod and then sit down with Mark and Marie and figure out, Mark clearly would have the content, and maybe Marie would put together the item, just seeing what their workloads are like and their skill sets, and go from there. As long as folks are open to us using them this way, their time. Yeah, Jack.
Yeah, I'm pretty supportive of doing something like that, but what I'd like to see also along with it is how this piece is going to be marketed. What's the plan for actually getting out there? going to have a scrolling bit on BTV10? Are we going to be publishing and like inserting in newspapers, or
Sure.
are we just producing the piece to go and put on the counter?
Well, I can, that's a really good point, and I can try and come up with some ideas with staff and bring them back to council,
Yeah.
get some feedback.
Kathy?
Yes, Mayor?
Vanessa's already working on a citywide communications strategy, identifying all the different ways to get information out there, which could work for the council, work for the administration, work for the city as a whole. So if you want to use that information and those sources, you wouldn't have to reinvent them yourselves. We can come up, obviously, anything you come up with yourself is great too, but we're looking into what's the best way to make sure that people are always apprised of what's going on and what avenues we could use. And Jack, BTV10 was one of the things that I think, we've underutilized for some city business besides just televising our council meetings. There are other things that we can put on. So that might be something else to have a discussion about.
Great.
Other content.
Thank you. Okay, so it looks like I got head nods to, okay, great, thank you. The other thing is similar. In the past, we've had a Martin Luther King Day celebration of some kind that frequently was either held at City Hall or sponsored by City Hall at the municipal court. I think last year it didn't happen for a number of reasons. And we have some interest among our staff that would maybe like to use some time to bring that back to City Hall or the municipal court, whatever would be the right venue. And Terry has expressed interest in being involved in making that happen as well. So I just wanted to get the head nod that also that's okay for us to use staff resources to kind of be a lead to get that event going again in the community. Okay? Yes, Mayor?
I don't know how many of you attended the event at Bellingham High School that we did in conjunction with the, in fact, right now, right off the top of my head, Volunteer Center and other groups. So there was an event that the city participated in last
Right.
year. So I don't want you to think that nothing was done. That
Right.
So doing it at City Hall, if somebody's willing to organize that, is great. And there may be some, like with public publicity and stuff, that the city has staff that can do that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. There are a number of events that happen that day in the community, I think, and so things did occur. This particular one didn't, and I was thinking if we got the go-ahead from all of you that Murray's first task would be to kind of put feelers out and see what is happening and how we might complement that.
Yeah, and that was a really good event. In fact, many people came up to me at that event. Susan Del Bene was there, and I was
Nice.
there, saying that they really liked the event that was paired with volunteerism, because they felt like that was Dr. King's
Service.
mission,
Right.
and that it wasn't just being inspired, it was being inspired and then going
Acting.
out and acting on it. So if we plan something at City Hall, it might be nice to have some volunteer effort associated with that, because it was something that I think the citizens over at the high school really liked.
Great, thank you. Okay, that's all I had. Is there anything else under old or new business? Seeing none, okay. We're at this time, the council meeting will adjourn to executive session. Executive sessions are closed to the public. A report will be given at the regular meeting. A governing body may hold an executive session only for specified purposes which are identified in RCW 42.30. We have 5 items today. First is litigation, Fred Meyer Stores, Inc., and Elimination's appeal of the MDNS and consolidated permit issued for the Costco project. The second is potential property acquisition. Third is potential property acquisition. Fourth, litigation, Furlan et al. Versus Chuckanut Community Forest Park District, Whatcom County, Stephen Oliver, and the City of Bellingham. And the fifth is labor relations bargaining strategy. The length of today's executive session is approximately 50 minutes, so we will reconvene here at approximately, I'm going to say 4:10.